we are very interested in what's in your heart and what is on your mind and your experiences. We don't want anything sugar-coated. We want it straight, we want it honest, we want it complete, okay? So don't leave anything out. If you feel strongly about something, we want to hear it. The great, I was just listening last night to Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. And if we are to come together as brothers and sisters like he advocated and continues to advocate from beyond the grave, if we're to do that, we need to talk to each other. We need to understand each other. We need to know what's in each other's hearts and be able to respond that way. And that's why we are here today, is to talk to each other and learn about each other and grow together. So hopefully that's what we're able to get out of today's discussion. So even if I don't ask a question that you have an answer to, please speak up. Please tell me what's in your heart. Will you? Okay. On August 28th, 1963, Dr. King delivered the I Have a Dream speech from in front of the Lincoln Memorial, a very significant place. And I don't know how many thousands, it must be well over 100,000 people attended that in person, and it was televised. And it was an iconic and milestone speech. He called on all of us to come together as brothers and sisters in that speech. I'd like to know, for you dear friends who have come here to Utah, some of you have been born and raised here, some of you have moved here, as you take the temperature of where we are in coming together as Dr. King had asked us to do, where do you feel like we are? Where do you feel like we are? Brandon, let's start with you.
I mean, unfortunately, in so many ways, I don't feel like that much progress has been made. Just in general, the things that he was advocating for at the time in terms of segregation, in terms of policing, black wealth, those things statistically are almost in the exact same place as back in 1963 when he was still fighting his fight. You know, when you talk about the Voting Rights Act that got passed a couple years later after that, that's still sitting on, that's being debated in Congress right now. So unfortunately, like a lot of times I get sad to think about after everything that he did and everything he said and everything, all the sacrifices that he made, in the most important ways, we're still in the same spot.
And if Ava Rose, where do you feel like we are?
I also agree with him. Being a kid in the school system in Utah, it feels unwelcoming at my high school. It doesn't feel like much has changed. A lot of the people at our schools kind of look over the black people and the kids who are there oftentimes, and I honestly think that there still needs improvement.
Well, I feel like, I mean, I'm kind of the in-betweener as far as age comes. I've been through high school, haven't gone as far as some of these people in this room, but I think growing up here has made me kind of ignorant to a lot of things in my personal culture and the things that I should know about anything cultural. And as I've gotten older, I've seen things that I didn't see before. And I think there
Like
has
what?
been...
Like what?
I allowed a lot of people to get away with things that shouldn't have been okay. I allowed people to talk to me a certain way. And in some ways, they say ignorance is bliss, you know. I was one of the only girls, I was actually the only black female on my swim team. I was one of like 5 black people at my high school period. And there were a lot of discriminatory things said that I didn't take to heart because I've always been believing that people have always had the best interest and always say the things that they want to say. but as well, like, you know, being young, sometimes you don't realize the things that are being said. So that part of not feeling welcome and all that, all these things need to be taught. You can't just tell everybody to make a change and expect everyone, okay, I get it. Change needs to be done. This is exactly what I need to do. No, those things need to be advocated, just like Martin Luther King. He went out and explained to people what was wrong, what needed to be fixed, how we could fix it. It's not just coming together and being in a room together. It's about talking about it and explaining it and actually getting into the deeper meaning of why people act the way that they do, why people say the things that they do, and why they think it's right or wrong and how that affects other people.
Tiffany, you're on the front lines in school. And certainly you have thought about this. Where is what Pam just described, where is that coming from? Where people say things that are not right and are not appropriate. And what is the genesis of that?
Well, our first teachers are our parents and our families. So most of what you learn comes directly from home. So when a student calls another student the N-word or anything like that, and parents are like, I don't know where they heard that, it typically starts from coming at home. I heard, sorry, was it Rose? Is it
Ava Rose.
Ava Rose. I
yeah.
heard Ava Rose where she said that she feels like she's not being heard and seen. For me, as a black teacher in high school, I'm typically students' first black teacher. And I also teach social studies, which is now faced with new issues with the whole critical race theory. Things that were taught as history before are now seen as a political agenda. So just me talking about mass incarceration, I can be accused of having a political agenda because who's mostly incarcerated. So I'm seeing things like that on the forefront, and it really, other things like on social media, like I wasn't taught that in school, I wasn't taught that in school. It's like, that really irks me and makes me want to make sure that I am teaching history for everyone to know, right?
Do you feel like you have to walk on eggshells in a certain kind of way?
I have. I've been ran out of a school. In South Jordan, I was ran out of a school for teaching civil rights, which is part of the Utah Core. But they said, we're saying things, you're making my kid feel guilty, you're making my kid feel like they own slaves, when really I did my lesson planning with the other teachers. We all talked about what we were going to teach about, but coming from a black woman, they felt like I had an agenda to push onto their children, when I was just stating the facts and the truth. And sometimes the truth can be uncomfortable, but they didn't want their children to have to deal with that uncomfortableness.
Kellogg, tell us about your experience. You're a businessman. Tell us how you got started.
That's crazy. I got started right over there, actually, in that parking lot.
Okay, speak nice and loud, okay?
I got started right over there in that parking lot. When I first got my truck, well, I didn't have a truck at the time. I had an Acura Legend, and I hooked the trailer on the back of it so I can do the moves. And I had to stay in the back of the truck. When I first got the truck, I had to stay right over there in that parking lot against that wall.
You were sleeping in the truck?
Yeah, I had to sleep there because I couldn't afford the rent and the cost of the truck at the same time.
Wow.
But I got through that, and then I was so excited to tell everybody that I own my own business. And as I was telling everybody I own my own business, knocking on these doors, the people that I told it was my business never used me again. The ones that I told that I was a manager always used me, because they called me back and said, hey, you guys did a great job. When I was the manager, they knew the money was coming to me. So the profit margin was negotiable at all times, as far as that goes. So that was something that I knew. But what I get from Martin Luther King is, it's about us understanding that we have to find a reason to fight. It's never going to be equal across the board for the rest of our lives. We all know that. But the fact is that we all got to understand that we have the grit to fight. Through adversity comes great things. If we all know that someone is a certain way, you know, you could take that positive into something. I do moves and people will tell us to move this over there. I'll take it back downstairs, and my guys are saying to me, why do you take it down there? I said, aren't you getting paid by the hour? He said, yes. Well, they're paying your rent, right? I'm like, yes. So we got to make sure that we find a way so we can step forward instead of looking at ourselves as a color. As soon as someone treats us bad, we start to think about us as being blacks And when we should think about, as Martin Luther King, think about us as a way to fight and get past it. So you fight it with like positivity and turning something negative into something positive.
Raphael, I find it fascinating. Dr. King did not say, he did not call for black dominance. That's not what he called for. Right. He called for brotherhood. He called for integration, truly calling each other brothers and sisters.
True. So what I take from Dr. Martin Luther King is a little deeper than the surface area. I think when you really listen to the I Have a Dream speech, it's about inclusion. But what is inclusion, right? Inclusion is this, we're here to converse, right? And we're included. But let's think about it. Tiffany said something that kind of struck a nerve with me, and it's mass incarceration, right? Mm-hmm. You see that, but how do you make a difference? Well, we need black people at higher levels, right? So if we have these laws that doesn't necessarily include other people for like the same crimes, right? Say I go out, shoot someone, and somebody else that's of another color shoots someone, more than likely I'm gonna get more time, right? So why don't we have more black politicians, right? More black judges, more black lawmakers. That's how you make transitional change. That's true change. Now you have other people, or you have your own people that are in a position of power, and that's inclusion. Being included into a business, this young gentleman behind me, he has his own business, right? But there's trucks, Ryder, for instance, you have Ryder, you have all these other big trucks, right? What about Walmart giving him a contract? Now he can change 20 other people's lives, right? If you have more millionaires, right? If you have inclusion equals wealth. When you have wealth, you can change lives of others. And it's the bigger picture I think Dr. Martin Luther King was trying to convey is that it's great to come together in a room, but are we the higher echelon of management? Are we making the decisions to create a society in which we feel that we can compete with our white counterparts, right? So I think that's the bigger picture when we're talking about inclusion. Because the dream isn't just, it's typically if you told me you had a dream, it's subjective, it's your dream. Dr. Martin Luther King wasn't speaking from a subjective approach, right? He was speaking for all of us as a human race, right? Yeah. And it starts in the home, right? It starts in the home, and that's, even I'm a believer in God, and I believe that when you have these values and norms, and you have these little black girls and black boys growing up in a household where they're appreciated, right? And they have that culture, it's great, because then they have to go out in Utah and you don't really see yourself reflected into the people that you're around. So you're like, I'm a psychologist, so I have kids, they'll come and say, my skin looks like poop. Well, no, your skin is beautiful. Let's break down the science of it. You have more melanin so you can protect yourself from the sun, right? And hey, I'm black and I'm proud. There's nothing wrong with being proud. It's not making somebody else uncomfortable. It's just embracing who you are and being proud. And it starts at home. So I think there's a lot of different nuances in the I Have a Dream speech, but I think the conclusion is that we need more people of color in positions of power.
Well, with that, sorry.
I was just going to add, pro-black doesn't mean anti-white. And that's where I think some people miss that. Just because we're rooting for each other because of the way our system was set up, that we've been held down for so long, that being proud of being black and being pro-black doesn't mean anti-white or anti any other ethnicity.
Yeah.
And with that is, I think, I've heard a couple of times, like she was saying, pro-black is not anti-white, and they're saying, okay, well, Mexicans, I'm Mexican as well, Mexicans go through things, like American Indians go through things, everybody goes through things, but we're, as a black and Mexican female, I'm pushing for female rights, I'm pushing for black rights, I'm pushing for Mexican rights, not just one right because it's popular, right? I'm obviously going to fight for the things that I want to. So if you want to fight for the things you want, that's what you have to do, and you have to bring your community to do that along with you. It's not just because it's popular, but there are a lot of things that need to be addressed all the time. And he was talking about how, you know, we need to put more people of different races and ethnicities in positions of power. But with that being said, it's not just obviously handing these people things so we can make it equal, but there are successful Black people that get to that point and they're like, I've never had this, I've never been here, but they don't put that back into their community, right? They're up there and they're so focused on being the best, being the first Black, being the first, you know, doing all the great things, but they're not coming back to these small communities where they're like, hey, I want to be able to fund this kid's you know, dream. I want to be able to give back and collaborate with other Black people. You know, we come here and we meet each other, but we've never actually worked with each other. We have to start showing up for each other and helping each other so those things can happen and so that we can get to higher things.
Jacob, let's get you in here. You just told me that you work a whole bunch of different jobs and you are busy all the time. When Raphael talks about reaching the upper echelons, and Pam talks about reaching the upper echelons of management and ownership, do you see that in your future? Is that where you're headed? Or tell me, when you hear that, what that makes you feel.
I see it in my future. I think I'm in an industry where it's a little harder than a lot of other industries. I'm in the hospitality industry. So, I mean, when you go to hotels, when you go to stuff like that, like, when I first got in the industry, I felt like I was almost having to convince hotels to let me be the face of their hotel, which was something which was, I felt like, really hard for some hotels to do, depending on where it was at. Especially in Utah, like, I'm the first thing guests see when they come in. So I'm a nice centered Black man right in the front, greeting you. And I think it took me a while to kind of jump those humps of things. But I think once now I've got into the flow and rhythm of things, a lot of people, I'll bring this up, a lot of people call it whitewash. That's a thing in Utah. So I'm adopted, so I have white parents. And so people they'll be like, oh, you just put on the white side of you, and that's how you're getting these jobs. Like,
do people say that to you?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my.
That's a huge thing.
I'll be at the hotel and I'll be talking to another Black guy and he's like, oh, so you're just like, so are you like acting white then? Like, is that how you're like getting this job and stuff like that? And it's just coming from a place of like, because I'm adopted and don't have the so-called Black background, they think that like it's almost a stepping stone for me because I know how to play both sides per se, which I don't think it's true.
You're just you.
I'm just me. Like,
Just loving who you are.
I just don't. I haven't been like even in high school like trying to fit into both sides was like I'd have white friends here and Black friends here, and like my Black friends would say I'm whitewashed because I'm hanging out with my white friends. My white friends would say I'm changed because I'm hanging out with my Black friends. So like that kind of was a big hump for me, especially being in the industry I'm in. It's where people like I at the beginning of it, I felt like I needed to come in and take my earrings out, and I wear a chain, wear a nice suit, like give the impression that I wasn't a so-called thug or anything like that.
But does it frustrate you that anything that is positive is associated with white, and anything that is negative or condescending is associated with Black?
So yes, especially in school, like when I was down at SUU. I was a sports kid for a while, and I felt like that was my only image, and then I switched and I became more involved in clubs and more just involved in school and stuff like that. And it was hard for people to understand that because being Black in Utah, they just expect you to be an athlete. Like they just expect you to be the athlete, to be the guy who's trying to go to the NFL or trying to go to the NBA or anything like that. And so like being the one who switched from athletes to school and really made school predominant for me, like I was trying to show like this is a different side you can take. Like you can, so I was like a club president for the hospitality program. I did DECA in college. Like I was trying to show that like you can be not just that so stereotypical like Black NFL player or whatever. And so that was kind of a little different there.
Can I touch on that for a moment? Because we were having a conversation earlier and he was talking about I was born and raised here in Utah. And of course, there is more diversity now than there was when I was growing up. But for me, because he asked how was it for me growing up being a black woman here, and I had to own my blackness more than anything, saying that I felt like I was pigeonholed into what black was, what it meant to be black. And it wasn't until I got older and I went to other states and I saw that you can be black and be alternative. You can be black and like, you know, punk, you can be black and be into goth, you can be black. Like, being black doesn't center you into, oh, you only like this type of music or you should only dress this way. Like, black people come in very different varieties and have different likes and things like that. So I think that part of being black in Utah, they try to pigeonhole us into what it means to be black.
I think that's probably one of the best things about being black in Utah is being able to be diverse and growing amongst so many different, like she said, so many different backgrounds as far as culture is concerned. Like black people and white people want to put black people in just a certain culture. You're supposed to be a certain way. You're supposed to dress a certain way. You're supposed to listen to only one kind of music. But being black in Utah, you kind of have to experiment with all of the above. Yeah. And so when I lived in Indianapolis, when I was young, they made fun of me because I talked white. And the only difference was just I pronounced R's and things. And so, and you know, and I got in a couple scraps about it because I'm offended. Like, I'm black. What do you mean? Like, you know, but yeah. So yeah. That's so when you fight both sides of the spectrum. As far as being black in Utah, that is one of the positives I think that you get from that.
Okay.
I like that. We're very versatile. They like to make you seem like we only sing, we only play sports. There's so many things black people can do. Absolutely. Like, I want to be an architect, but there's so many things I can go far with that, but they like to belittle you and put you in a box. Like, you have to be this person. Like, you have to talk like, hey girl, you have to say all that type of stuff, but there's so much more to us than that. I mean, we're intellects.
Right.
You
Absolutely.
grow.
That's
so.
right. And if I can add to that, I can't speak from the perspective of a black woman, but I do know black women have it harder. But I will speak from the perception for me. Being in Utah as a professional, I command my respect. I know who I am. I wasn't born here, so I don't have to. There's some. If you're black and you're born here, there's some trauma. There's probably going to be some trauma. For me, I was surrounded by other black African American people who were very strong. So it was a sense, because we live in an individualistic society. Back in 1963, black people were together. It wasn't so much of like crabs in a bucket type of person or type of situation where it was more uplifting. But now it's like, I think you were saying it's like I make it to the top, and it's like I'm not going back to the I'm not, just because I've made it, I'm not better than anyone else. So it's I think that's part of it. But as a black man, when I go to work, when I meet my white counterparts, I command my respect. I know my value. I know my worth. This is how much I want, because that person's making that amount. We have the same education. I demand it. I uplift myself. But it's hard to do that if you're always on the outside looking in, and you're like, it starts to mess with your confidence. And I don't know, you were born here, adopted, you know, and it's great. You have great white parents that helped you get there, but at the same time, there's some things that you will lack because your parents aren't black. They can't teach you, but they can teach you how to be a man. Yeah. You have to search for that as you move on in life, right? But it doesn't make you less black than me or anyone here, right? It doesn't make,
it just makes your black experience different.
Like, we'll talk about how like I met Ramon. Like, my mom kind of, as I got a little bit older, realized that like I needed to be part of my community. So I really am grateful for my parents in that realm of like, they pushed for me to be as black as I could be. They got me into the barbershop. They got me into black churches, stuff like that. Stuff where like I felt more included, because I did go to a charter school growing up as well. And so I didn't really see any black people until
I really got into sports, and then from there my mom was like, well, let's see if we can find other places for you to connect with black people.
Right.
And then I did travel for track, and so my parents tried to get me out into the world as much as they could, knowing that like it's not something they can teach at home. So to go with like what Ramon said about Indianapolis, like when I would travel for track, I'd go to meets and I'd kind of be the outcast almost. Like all the black kids would be over here talking with each other and stuff like that, and they could just tell I was different from my mannerisms, from the way I spoke, from just how I did things. And so like I always tell a story, I was back running in Nebraska, and I said the N-word, and a couple of kids have known where I was from and stuff like that, and the black kids treated me as if like that's not okay for me to say. They're like, you aren't part of a culture, you don't know what it's like to be black, you're from Utah, like you don't get it.
But you would know.
That's not a word.
But it's just your own. It's your own
Like,
experience.
I was like, I don't know how that, like, no, I'm black, like, I face racism too. Like, I don't know how you feel like you face more racism just because you're in a different state where there's more black people and stuff. Like, that doesn't connect for me.
Well, you know, it's really interesting, and because there's a whole bunch of things I want to ask about this, but the thing that comes primarily to mind, and forgive me for not remembering what the name of the movie was, but Denzel Washington, I think and a whole cast, the whole cast is black. They just came out with a movie. They were doing interviews, and Fences, yeah, Fences, and the questioner asked the group, did it make a difference having a black director for this movie? And I don't know if you've seen this interview. And Denzel said, it's not about color, it's about culture. Culture. And so when we talk about the black culture and I would imagine, and we're going to face this in our own family as well, as I've told some of you, we're going to face it too, where those two cultures, they don't intersect. There are points where they don't intersect, right? And so we have to make an effort to make sure that they intersect, so that our dear children and those of you who have been adopted by white parents don't wind up getting lost between the two cultures.
Just how you were touching on that with Denzel, I mean, that just goes along with what my shirt is saying today, like representation matters, right?
Yeah.
It matters to have people of color in the community and have access to those. It's important to have black teachers and black principals. It's important to have black doctors and lawyers, and just knowing that so that kids don't fall into what the stereotype black person is. Like she's mentioned before, we're more than singers, we're more than athletes. Seeing that there are black people every day making a living from wholesome beginnings and things like that.
Sure.
I think a lot of it is just representation and making sure that's available.
And it goes to it's not just white people, it's any culture that loves black culture, whether it's music or whatever it is. It's how can you be so, I guess, in a sense, you can't have the ice cream without having the cone. You can't say I love rap music and disrespect black people, right? Mm-hmm. And it's we're in the fabric of America, right? So that's important. We are a part of it. It just feels like we got the second tickets all the way to the back sometimes.
Can't be for the
right?
culture, but not about the
exactly.
culture.
And I think, and I'll take it back to 1963. I feel like if Dr. King was alive, there's improvement. There's white people that are conscious, right? And they know, like, hey, for instance, yourself, right? But at the same time, that's not enough, right? But what is enough? It's not like we're trying to finish the race, but we're trying to catch up to where we're somewhat. It's not necessarily about getting ahead. It's just having some bit of equality, right? And it starts, whether it's an inch or a foot or a mile, any progress is good progress, right? So even with the Barack Obama, it wasn't so much that he was black, it was just like, hey, we finally won something, right? So, and you can take that and go down different avenues, but I even think it's deeper than that. I don't think that 1963 was just about black people, but people in general. I think we've gotten away with it for a long time, but we don't love each other as much, even in our culture, other people outside of our culture. We could take it deeper, right? We can take it even deeper and deeper and deeper, whether it's Hispanics are coming into this country, right? If I was given a pretty bad deal where I'm from, I'm gonna try to get out too, right? And then we just turn people around, right? Like, it's what happened to the love? What happened to having a heart? What happened to the compassion? These are all things that Dr. King stood for. And we see it manifest in different ways. Instead of saying, oh, hey, we don't like it because your skin color, it's like, well, you don't qualify. Right? Oh, this loan, you got this on your credit, or this, that, and the other. It's other ways that racism has manifested itself in different ways where it's passive aggressive. So,
yeah, let's talk about that, Brandon. You've been sitting here contemplating your next comment. I know you have. Talk about that microaggression. I mean, and Ramon and I have talked about this before too, and it just absolutely breaks my heart to think that my dear friends have to live in a situation where microaggression is just part of the day, and you have to put up with that nonsense. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, that's a huge part of growing up in Utah, right? When you say microaggression, just to define that real quick or give an example of what that looks like. I get a lot of, you speak so well, right? Or, I just love the way that you present yourself and things like that, which is a compliment, but it's just like, I know what you're saying. I don't think you know what you're saying, right? Because it's not something that's out of malice or anything like that. It's out of ignorance, and it's out of really a form of racism, where this person might actually admire me and have an appreciation for me, but at the same time, they view black people as someone in this box that we've been referring to, or something that is maybe slightly less than, because they didn't expect me to be able to speak the way that I do, right? And you mentioned love, and love is very important, but especially when it comes to microaggressions, like, love is not enough. I remember I was sitting over there a couple of years ago, and Ramon had someone in his chair, a little black boy who had been adopted, and his white mom was speaking to Ramon. The kid was, he wasn't behaving himself, he was just being a kid. And she was kind of complaining or telling Ramon about how he had been behaving, and then she was like, well, is it because he's black? Now, I'm sure that woman loves her child very much, right? But at the same time, that is racism, and it's still harmful. And like, whether or not somebody's well-intentioned with these things, we still have to be accountable to the way that we treat people and the way that we view people. And like, you see that a lot in Utah, which is like those microaggressions are everywhere, and it just kind of lets me know like kind of what time it is and how people kind of view me and how they look at me.
Do you think it's because no one can check them in Utah? I think that's a big thing. That is a lot of it. In other states,
it's awkward.
They get checked by black people. Like in my high school, there was 7 black kids. A white kid said the N-word. Just wasn't worth my time to check them because I wasn't gonna win that battle. There was 2,000 white kids and 7 black kids. Like, it's not like that in other states where the little microaggressions get checked.
Where they're there for support.
Where they're like, hey, that's like, you can't say stuff like that. Like,
well,
that's not cool.
I think you have to pick them as far as how many battles you can fight. Mm-hmm. Certain things need to get checked.
Absolutely.
Like one time I was at the bank and a lady came up to me. She said, "You're good looking for a black man." So I was like, hey, you. I said, well, hold on, what?
I can't just be good looking?
Yeah.
Why did you add the last part?
I said, sweetheart, I think you meant well with that statement. But let's because, no, really, that's very offensive because is there not any other good looking black people in the world? Like, do you have to leave? Or the lady I seen, she had a backpack and a leash on her child. And I just walked up to her, I said, listen, I know you really well and you're just trying to keep track of your child, but putting a leash on a black child, that's animalistic. I said, I'm being friendly to you. Somebody's not going to appreciate that. So just make it look a little better. Hold their hand or hold them or something because that doesn't look good at all. It makes it look animalistic.
Even like Ramon, you hit something.
black women get that all the time. Like you're pretty to be dark skinned, or you're pretty like
for a black girl.
And the worst part is that like me, like I said, I'm Mexican, black, and I grew up in a predominantly white culture. So I get all of it, right? So I get athletes that come out of state and they're like, oh, you know, like I don't really like black girls, but I kind of like you because you're more like a white girl. And I said, I had someone tell me that. And they're like, you're black enough for me to like you, like to kind of like pretend you're someone from my home. And I'm like, hold on, like what? Like that's so crazy to me that you just said that to me, you know, because I've been around so many cultures, and for you to strip me away from everything, what am I? You know what I'm saying? I sit here and I ask myself, what am I? You know, am I Mexican? Am I black? Am I white? You know, like where do I fit in with all of this? And what do you guys see me as? And that makes it really hard. Like, you know, there's this huge like trend of being light skinned. You know, everything that I do is always like, hey, you're light skinned this. Hey, because you're a light skin, you do this. Because you're a light skin, this and that. And they put me on a pedestal that I didn't even ask to be on because I'm a light skin. I think I'm better. I have girls who have darker skin than me that treat me differently because they automatically assume the moment I walk in that I think I'm better than them. And that's not true.
Yeah.
If you really want to get specific into it, our hair.
Definitely.
Oh, definitely. If you just straighten it, they're like, oh, I like your hair better curly, you know? If you curl your hair, I like it straight. Why can't you like have your hair like mine? Braids, they feel the need to touch it. Don't touch my hair. It's the worst. Just stuff like that. They try to make you feel small. I don't know what it is. It's just Utah makes me feel really small. I cannot embrace myself.
I would like to agree on that too, especially, like I said, at school. A lot of the teachers actually growing up have always, if I had braids, they would touch my hair, or if I had an afro, like I remember once we had this event and it was kind of like a retro, I don't know, 70s event, and I wore an afro, and like at the end of the day I just let it out because the event was after school, and my whole class like just ran, like they were all white. I was the only black girl in the class. They all just ran to me and everybody just touched my hair. Everybody.
They think the hair is cool, they think the culture is cool, but they don't want to be a part of it.
Yeah, and they talk down also and make slight jokes thinking that, oh, it's just a joke, it's just, we're only kidding. Like, I remember also in middle school that my friend was joking with someone who was white, and they told her that she should go back to where she came from, she should go back to Africa. And she wasn't even full black. And I told the teacher about it, and she let it go. She was like, okay, well, I don't think that you should, because I got really mad. I told the guy off, and the teacher was like, I don't think you should come at him like that. I think that you should really just calm down. And he didn't get in trouble at all. And so there's a lot of like, just let it slide, just ignore it, just ignore them. Don't talk back to them, don't yell at them, that's very mean. And it's like we can't speak.
A lot of gaslighting.
Yeah, gaslighting. Yeah.
And that's the problem, is that we're not educating people like why certain things are wrong. You know, when you come in school and we learn about Black history, okay, we learn about all the bad things that happen, and okay, we shouldn't, you know, hit Black people. We shouldn't do all these crazy aggressive things, and like you said, the micro, right? So we're not talking about the little things, the little jabs, the things that mean something still. We're not educating anybody on that. You know, like she said, people learn things from home, but they don't come to school and they're like, hey, just so you guys know, this is what you should and shouldn't be doing, because they're still young. There's a lot of people that have actually, I've actually had people from my high school apologize to me now because they were afraid of asking me to school dances. They were afraid of doing all this because of how they were going to get looked at by other people. I wasn't asked by to a lot of school dances and stuff like that. But now that I'm older and they've experienced life somewhere else and someone actually taught them that it's not okay to treat people a certain way, they've come back and said, you know what, I treated you this way and that was wrong. But why does it have to be after high school that they learn all of these things? They should be learning these things in school by their peers and other people, that there's a certain way to treat people, whether it's about their color or not.
I would like to address some of that, because I think in some instances Teachers don't know how to have those conversations, even though during part of the getting a degree in teaching is like multicultural curriculum and things like that. They still are not ready to face the difficult questions, and especially in something with like social studies, where we're talking about people, and I'm relating and having them think about what has happened in the history and what is happening now and how they correlate with each other. A lot of it, again, can be difficult conversations, and kind of what Jake brought up too. Like, I'll have students who are sneakerheads, right? They're really into sneakers, not realizing that comes from Black culture. But then on the other side, they have a complaint, or Tiffany talks, or Miss Rasmussen talks about too much about Black history, too much. When I don't just talk about Black history or Hispanic history, I talk about history, and multicultural curriculum is history. Yes. It shouldn't be separated. And I think we focus too much on what you're trying, the bad things that have happened, but what about the inventions that Black people have made, or you know, how they've impacted culture, how they impact pop culture. And students have a hard time hearing that sometimes because that's not what they're used to. That's true. And again, a lot of students that I have are in 11th and 12th grade, and I'm their first Black teacher. Mm. And they said, well, I never heard that before. I never learned that before. Why?
Yeah.
First and only, I never had a Black teacher. And I mean, there's a theme with what you've been saying in terms of, you know, you're an educator, but there's a lack of education racial topics in education, and that's a theme that keeps happening. And right now, I mean, as a specifically race of Utah, there's a large population that is actively fighting the exact type of education that we're saying that we need. Right. When in terms of critical race theory, I was never taught critical race theory in school. We were only taught there was slavery, and then for a while, Black people couldn't use the same bathrooms as white people. Then Martin Luther King came along, and then everything was great. Like that was my education, right? And so,
just like that. How do you like that?
And so now we're talking about people actively trying not to even have that much, or to hold it to that standard. It's really frustrating, but that is very important to kind of the attitude in Utah, where it's just like people don't want to be uncomfortable at all. It's just like we can't solve anything if nobody is
uncomfortable.
It's going to continue to be a problem because it's exposure. And when you have a lack of Black people in a place like Utah, there's us, but there's a lack of exposure, right? And growth is uncomfortable. And this is, for me, it's self-reflection is essential to growth. And a lot of people that are in positions of power, teachers they can't reflect, right? Because they don't know what it's like, because they've never been in that situation, right? Just like I wouldn't know what it's like to be white, right? At the same, and this isn't me making an argument for our white counterparts, is what I'm saying is that in order for it to change, it has to be more exposure, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to have more exposure, and you have to have these people have some self-reflection. Like, you know what? Maybe I'm not doing enough. You know, maybe I'm not exposing my kids to enough. You have to think about things from a psychological perspective. Somebody call you hey nigger, you like, okay, you can, hey, it's about to go down, right? Or you can say, hey, come here, young brother, let's have a seat. You know where that word come from. Educating, right? You're an educator. So this is why you don't do it, right? I want to hear you, you're better than that, right? Yeah. So it's like you have control over your actions, right? You have a thoughts equal behavior, right? And that's part of it, right? I'm talking about the psyche part of it. Mm-hmm. So if you can have that cognitive restructuring going on where you're, hey, you know what? This might work, right? But you also hit another point. It's kind of hard when you don't have exposure.
Just to go along with that, sorry.
Go ahead.
Just a question for the group. So kind of go along with trying to get more Black people into teaching and doctors and stuff like that. So there's been a trend though where now companies are just hiring for diversity. So where is the line drawn? Where am I getting the job because you need a Black person in your company, or am I getting the job because I'm qualified? Mm-hmm. Like I think that's where I'm struggling right now. Is where's that line now?
It's right to that.
Because
and I would imagine that that's probably the most insidious form of racism that is out there, you know.
And that's just how racism's changed from kind of your first question from back in the 1960s. I mean, that's just how racism has changed.
Because now people are seeing it as handouts.
Now it's in these little set forms. It's not to your face anymore. It's just more around you. Like people don't come to me as much. I'll say it's still in your face, but not as much. I see it more on social media now, where like kind of the Joe Rogan thing, where people are going back and saying and checking people now on social for stuff and stuff like that. It's not in your face as much.
Because if you check someone, you got to think about the psyche of that. It's like, okay, am I going to lose my job? Or am I going to lose my friends? Right? The social pressures of actually doing what's right. I mean, look at Muhammad Ali. He was like, hey, I'm not going to go fight a war. I don't have a problem with the Viet Cong, right? And then what happened? He was stripped. So we've been punished to address things in the past, but now it's we're in a society
So
where
just
you guys
hold
are 15,
on.
right?
Hold on.
You guys are the future.
So I just kind of have a question for the group. So I feel like the discussion is kind of, it's been good, but it's almost been like talking down on Utah too. But I feel like just with my age, like I'm trying to figure out if this is a state I do want to continue to grow up in, to continue to raise a family in and stuff like that. So I just want to throw a question at the group is like, what has kept you here though? Like something has kept you all in Utah, coming from other places where there are more black people and stuff like that. I mean, coming from where you could raise your kids where there's more diversity. Like, what is something that has kept you here?
I love Utah. I used to not like it just because of the problems that I had. Because when I was in Mississippi, you know, you knew someone was racist just by how they spoke to you. And here, it's taught me to be a better man and a stronger man just because of what I had to go through. So instead of always being the victim, I found like just how Martin Luther King, he knew it was never going to be equal across any board in any race. We're not the only one that's been, you know, down upon. You know what I mean? Because blacks against whites, whites against men. I mean, it just goes across the board. But the thing about Utah now is for a black man, a black person being in this state, I think there's a lot of opportunities here because there's so many people that have no problem with your race. Like, if you think the marches from back in the day, we never would have been able to sit on a bus, sit in the restaurants, if there wasn't someone of the opposite color who owned that restaurant that said they can sit there. So, with that being said, it's not all about white people, because, you know, some blacks are against each other, you know what I mean? But the thing about it is we got to take whatever we went through and become better. Black men's got to step up and be more men to our sisters, you know, the women in our lives and stuff. You know, look at all the black kids that are without fathers and stuff like that. As a black man, you know, we have a lot to do to be able to show the next generation. It's up to us in this room and people like this to get out there and prove that we can do something. Like you said, when a job, you get a job, you don't know what it's going to be because you're black or because it's your white side. If you get that job as what you are. If you black and white, be that. You know what I mean? If I'm going to be black, be that. If you're going to be a sister that get a job because of whatever, be that. And take that and teach the next generation that you can do it. Whether you're black, whether you're white, or whether someone was against you. You tell them what you did when you got in that door and you had that opportunity. That opportunity, here I stand. Mm-hmm. Like, look at Ramon. Ramon came from being in another business. When we walked in this place, we couldn't even, I mean, we both lost every bit of air inside of our lungs. But look where he stands now. Not just as a black man, but as a person. So there's nobody of any color stopped him from his goals. So that's what racism is supposed to, is teaching the man that you can do it. And we don't need to point the fingers at nobody. We can just say, you know what, if you get that opportunity, you take that opportunity, you make the best that you can. Like, in back of my shirt, it says never give up. You never give up. I went to certain jobs and they didn't want me because I was black. I went home and I faxed in a resume or whatever, and they still hired me. You know, I sent a Ryder truck, a U-Haul truck over there. I figured it out. So to me, it has made me a stronger man because of it. And now we have to, like, somebody said that, because, no, she said that we don't take that knowledge and share it with others. That's something that I'm guilty of. And that's something that I do need to do, is share that with the people who are struggling, saying that you can make it. Because half the people in this room, I don't know many of these people in this room, but they don't know my struggles. They had no idea that I'm driving down the street with a sofa on top of the roof. And, you know, buying furniture from Ashley Furniture and selling it on, you know, online. And I did all the above, but the thing about it, I did it as a man. I didn't do it as a black man. But the black comes in when certain people won't let me get anything, but I figured it out. Like Martin Luther King, he figured it out. He's just basically telling everybody, figure it out. Don't sit and take blame and say, this is why I can't make it. Say, this is why I could. That's, you know.
When I came here, because I've been here for 3 years, I had the biggest wall up. I'm like, dude, I am not taking crap from no one. I just want to do what I need to do. And that was an awful attitude to have. It's about collaboration. And there's a lot of white people that I've met that I'm really good friends with that have put me in a position not only for other opportunities, but to make really good money, right? So it's Martin Luther King said, don't judge me by the color of my skin, but the content of my character. And I feel out of all the places that I've ever lived, and I've lived a lot of places, Utah kind of embraces that. Yeah. I do like the church, the LDS church is here. It's and I've met a lot of wonderful, good-hearted, genuine people that want to make a difference, that want to help out. And I think that's why I stayed, because it's a special place and it starts to grow on you. And I think there's a lot of need, right? As far as when it comes to racial relations, there's a lot of improvement that needs to take place. But at the same time, if you look back in 1963, there was collaboration too. There were good white people that also marched with Martin Luther King, Bernie Sanders being one of them. So.
And I would say that I've talked to a lot of people that come out of state because I'm in the military, I play sports, I do events, I do all these things. So I talk to people out of state all the time. And they tell me, I come here, I expect, Mormons, white people, I'll go do my snowboarding and then head back. But the biggest reason that I realize they come here and then they stay is that, in a sense, there is kind of this, we get treated like a novelty, kind of like, oh, they're bringing something here, which we are, which is great. But, don't put us on a pedestal that we haven't even shown you we deserve, right? And a lot of people stay here. I actually just talked to somebody who moved from Florida, and they said they stayed here because it's safer, right? Our crime rate is a lot lower than a lot of bigger cities, other places, and that's because we don't have a lot going on here. So a lot of people stay here because it's safer here. So you have to pick your battles in every state that you're in. Do you want to get shot, or do you want to be able to be home and then face the microaggressions here and there? Which one do you want to deal with? And a big thing that I've actually come upon is that they're bringing the NBA here. What is that called? The
Utah Jazz?
All-Star. No, the All-Star. No.
They've been here for a while now.
Yeah, they've been here for a while. No, but the All-Star is coming here, and they actually almost try to cancel that in Utah because the lack of culture and the lack of things that are going on in the community. But now they've announced it, and it's like All-Star is going to happen here, and that's going to be huge for everybody. We're having some of the major cities, some of the craziest people that have so much power come here and bring the city and bring people from other states that come out here not just to snowboard, but to actually find out what Utah has.
Yeah. So I'd like to touch base on when he talks about religion. I also agree. I feel like Utah has a great religion-based kind of atmosphere around for the people who come here, because for me and my family, the reason why my family has stayed here is because of our church and what we believe in. And honestly, it's created belonging. Churches have created belonging. I go to a Pentecostal church, and it's really amazing. That's the one place that I go to for peace and for comfort, and the people around my church are understanding. So I feel like Utah is a great place for people who are religious or want to be religious, because it brings a different perspective also.
It makes it okay.
And if you've heard of Calvary Baptist, he actually the guy who runs the place, he actually
Reverend
walked,
Moses?
No, Reverend
Davis?
Yes.
Davis?
He actually walked with Martin Luther King in the march. So that was absolutely crazy to have that here, you know, and those are things that need to be talked about and known more, because a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah, his story, Reverend Davis's story, is so remarkable.
Yeah.
It's remarkable. And his arrival here was really something. So when you get a chance to
Before we
hear
move on
that.
from
Yeah.
that, like I just to say, I mean, for me personally, the reasons that I'm in Utah aren't so much because of Utah. The reason why I'm still here, I moved out here 20 years ago with my mom, but I'm here because of family and the small community that I do have, right? That's what's keeping me here. But I also have already decided when I start having children, like I'm going to move. Like I want my kids to grow up in a place where there is more diversity, where they can find and be appreciated much more in their communities, where they're not alone going to school and trying to learn how to set those boundaries all by themselves, right? Where they don't have to be like me, where yeah, there is black communities and black churches up here, but like I live in Orem, right? And so like I drive 40 minutes every week to get a haircut in this barber shop because there's nowhere else to go, right? And like that's fine. I can get my haircut down there if I want to, but I come here for that sense of community, and like there's just not a whole lot of that here, and I really want to be somewhere when I start having kids where we can get more of that appreciation.
And that makes sense, but that's the problem, is that we don't want to be somewhere where we're uncomfortable, we feel like we can't learn and grow. But who's going to do it if we don't do it? We have to start it. We have to teach our kids, hey kids, like we're gonna you know, you might feel uncomfortable because there's not too many of us, but make it known that you're here. Make it known that you're here to make a difference. Make it known that you're gonna teach everybody how to incorporate us in our everyday. Well, I'm not gonna move you so then these people are okay with where they're at, and they're okay with treating people however they treat, and they're gonna keep going about their lives. We need to teach our kids and the following generations. We have to be uncomfortable for us to work towards a different future.
If I can address that, what Jake was also saying, since I was born and raised here, I haven't left yet because I had my son at a very young age, and I didn't want to take him from his father, so I wanted to raise him in the same state. But I did tell, now that they're older, my second son is a senior, and then my youngest is going to be a junior in high school, but I tell them, I don't care where you go to college as long as it's not here. And the reason I tell them that is because I want them to experience culture and the life outside of Utah. I love Utah for, obviously I'm a very outdoorsy person. I love it because as Pam spoke on it, it's a safe place, but it still is lacking in other areas that I want them to be able to experience. And I think that they will be able to in bigger cities. There's more cultural awareness and more things going on that they can benefit from. So if they decide to come back, which my oldest went to school in Oregon and now he's back, and he wants to move again, but that's what I want. I want them just to be able to experience different kind of cultures and areas, and then decide if this is the right place for them.
Go ahead, Kim.
And then also, I'm about to graduate next year, and from high school. But I would love to go to the U. But after all those situations that I've been hearing, I don't even think I want to go to a college in Utah just for that. There's no diversity, and if there is a problem with race, they don't touch on it. They avoid it. They overlook it. They could care less about you as an individual. So that's why I'd rather go to an HBCU where I can be able to be myself, and feel like home.
Those are one of the conversations, that Jake brought up too, Brandon talked about too. Like I had to have those conversations with my boys, knowing that they were going to a predominantly white school. You cannot do the same thing as your white friends do. You cannot act the same way. Because you will get in more trouble, or you're already being looked at. There's already a spotlight on you, and if you slip up, you're not going to be treated the same way as if your white friends were the way that they're being treated. And so I can understand where Brandon says that he wants to give his kids an opportunity where they don't necessarily have to face that.
Like, don't let them face it at the beginning. Let them grow. Let them understand the culture, all that. Yeah. Then you can bring them back to Utah.
He's building them up before.
But you don't need to throw your son initially into the fire per se.
Right.
And give them a shot.
Because you handle it better as an adult. I mean, I'm like most of you guys were born in Utah. You can deal with it now because now you have a voice. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea, because as they're getting older, they'll already be prepared. I kind of was in that situation that you want to
kind of provide your kids with that. I grew up that way with other black kids and white, but it wasn't like white kids or anybody else wouldn't get out of line because there was checkpoints there, you know what I mean? But at the same time, I had a quick question if you don't mind me asking.
Sure.
This is for all of you guys. How do you feel that being like raised here, it had, and going through the things that you've gone through, affected your mental health?
Most definitely.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
How so? How so?
Oh man, I mean, there's so many things. I don't even know where to start. I mean, okay, so we took a couple of summers ago, you know, Black Lives Matter movement, the summer of George Floyd, however you want to describe it, right? It just really made me feel, being here, it was isolating, I'll just say that. Like, I took a couple of days off work. I just felt very isolated, and I actually, you know, when I did go back in the office, I actually held some racial discussions with members, with different teams in my office building. And it was just so isolating to see how disconnected the people around me were from my experience. They had no idea what I was talking about, and they were so surprised at me sharing my experience here in Utah and the racism that I encountered. And it was just like, I'm just by myself here, and you guys, you're asking questions like you care, but I know in 2 months this is not even going to be on your mind, right? And so it was very isolating.
Some of it was very performative, you know, like they acted like they care. I mean, just touching on what we were kind of talking about was past trauma. It's just because you can deal with it as an adult doesn't mean you should have to deal with it. And I can say it was very traumatizing for me growing up here in Utah, where my family at one point was ran out of South Jordan when I was younger because we were not LDS, and you know, we were black, and people don't realize that there are KKK members, and South Jordan does have a branch. Draper does have a branch there, and we were ran out of South Jordan. Going through life, going over the hoops that I had to go through the foster care system, being a teen mom, I went on to get multiple graduate degrees and became an educator, and thought this was my chance to finally show that the community that I am more than what they expected me to be, and we got a job. My first teaching job was in South Jordan, and I was ran out of that school. I still was not accepted. Even though I jumped through the hoops, I got the degrees, and I wasn't accepted.
Yeah, I think I'm separate from the group on this one. I don't think it hurt my mental health. I think it strengthened my mental health. From a standpoint of like, growing up, a lot of my friends, I feel like, played the victim card. Like, where sometimes, no, we just were doing something illegal. It was not that we were black. Like, we were simply just doing something illegal, but it was always the victim card. It was always the victim card. And so growing up, I was just like, no, like, I am not going to play the victim card. Like, I'm going to get myself where I want to be. If I get pulled over from the police, it's one of those things. I'm not scared that something's going to happen.
But statistically,
right? It's been proven.
It's been proven, but it's like when you're in a place like well, it doesn't even necessarily like Utah. Let's just take Utah out of the equation. As a race of black people, I don't think we utilize mental health services enough to combat the things that we're going through, or the challenging things that we think about, right? Because we're supposed to be strong. Our women are supposed to be strong. We're leaders, we need to be strong, carry the load, they need to carry the load, right? So if we're always strong, we're not addressing, but better yet suppressing, right? all these traumas, and we're like, okay, we'll deal with them, and then we don't deal with them, right? And then families get broken, right? Divorces happen. I'm not saying that's the equilibrium of all, that family equals divorce. I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is that when trauma or mental health issues go unchecked, it's devastating, right? And it's not good to hold all that in because it manifests in other ways. And then you can start thinking that you're the victim because you're just like, I'm tired of being strong. Why can't, I just live, right? Why can't I be happy, right? So I think as a society, it's the black society in general, whether we're in Utah, Detroit, or where my wife is from, or wherever, it doesn't matter. I feel like we have to be able to talk about these things and learn how to address those traumas.
Like, if you feel like you're a victim, go and talk about it.
Well, yeah, that, or
don't
just
say I'm the victim, oh poor me. Like,
right.
Go and talk about it.
Exactly.
Talk to someone
You
else.
have no one to talk to.
That's how I was about to bring that up. Like, come to a barbershop like this
and talk about your situation, get a feel from other people about like, oh, they've gone through this too. Like, okay, never, like, it's...
Right.
And those are things you have to advocate, though.
Ramon, I come up here, me and Ramon talk, I do a lot of talking with my wife. My wife is my best friend, but if I can't talk to my wife, I'm going to utilize one of my brothers or one of my sisters, or I can talk to Ramon, I can talk to whoever, right? And it doesn't even matter if it's a black person or if it's one of my friends that are LDS, it doesn't matter. It's just being able to have that type of dialogue with someone that truly like can understand and have that connection with you. You're like, I'm not alone, right?
Can we go back to what she was saying though, because I saw you mouth over there, like we don't have anyone to talk to, and then that goes back to the representation, right? Having being able to feel comfortable talking to a black counselor in your school or a black teacher, or knowing I myself was on the hunt for a black mental health counselor and a woman, so someone that I could feel like could relate to me, and I still haven't found it.
Mm.
So that's one of those moments where now you have to become it.
Mm-hmm.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah, like I said, we can't just complain about it. We have to, if you have a problem, if there's something that's not being done, it's hard to actually get to that state of mind where you're like, something's not being done and I'm going to complain about it, versus something not being done, I need to find the people, I need to find the resources, talk to people, make posters, do whatever I need to do to get those people that help, right? I talked a lot about psychology because we had kids pass away at my school, and it was kind of like, okay, let's bring these psychologists that are just gonna say something and you guys are gonna be okay. And that goes as far as like so many things, right? Psychology is being slept on overall.
Is it crisis intervention, or do you guys, because I don't know the school system per se here, but do they have any type of representation?
No, I think there needs to be a mental health check, period. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Not just a race thing, but a race thing definitely is one of those things that falls under the criteria of what mental health is, especially at such a young age. And there's so many things going on. We're constantly evolving. All these things are things that we need to because all the kids get their information from social media, how they should feel, how all these things, and mental health is not integrated into schools as much as it should be.
I had a comment on mental health. I think that it does affect a lot of teenagers and kids' mental health in Utah, especially because we had that recent case where a little girl did commit suicide because she was being bullied about the color of her skin. Right. And I feel like even when all of the protesting with George Floyd and all of this had happened, it scared me. It made me confused because I actually thought, it made me realize, for a second I thought that racism wasn't as bad as when my mom was young and she tells me stories about racism and what she's been told. And then all of this had happened within a year, and it made me scared and confused. Like, although he said that if he gets pulled over, he's not going to be afraid, I realized that it has scared me because once it was like a different situation where my mom did get pulled over for something small. And I actually was terrified. I've never have been in the past, but I was really scared inside. I wasn't sure what was going to happen. Is the police going to be nice or not? Like, it does affect personally my mental health, and probably other kids' too, especially because kids are literally acting upon how they feel with ending their lives. So
it's just tragic. We need to start to round the clubhouse turn here, as because we could go on all afternoon, and I wish we could, because there's so much good being talked about here. I want to touch base with you, Ramon, in that you are truly at the crossroads of the black community here. I mean, in a very unique, if uniqueness can be or have qualified, but you're in a unique position where you get to see so many different people in your chair, and they talk to you, and truly, I feel like you have your finger on the pulse of what's going on in the black community. Can you kind of give us a report card on how you feel like, as a whole, the community is doing and where improvement can be made?
That is such a broad question. I do get a lot of different personalities, a lot of backgrounds that come in here and they speak with me, like people that are raised here and people that migrate here, people that are here through school. And so I hear a lot of different things. First of all, we have a stigma in Utah from people that come from out of state that there's no black people here, there's no culture. It's only Mormons, it's only white, and that's not necessarily true. Now we have a small community, but it is a community here. People initially come here, they hate it because they feel like they don't see no people that look like themselves, and then they're like, oh, it ain't too bad because it's safe. The landscape is beautiful. We have other things that we do, but they do, just like pros and cons of any other place. We do lack our culture as far as food, places to go hang out, restaurants like that, things of that nature. But people do I get a lot of this, either they dislike it totally or they love it. There's not much in between. So you'll see people that say, man, I can't wait to leave here. And then they leave, and they end up coming back for certain reasons because it's like, it wasn't too bad, or I went back to my home where it was a little violent or whatever the case, it was too much and it's not as crowded, and so they come back to Utah for those reasons. So Utah has its pros and cons just like every other place, but the overall sense is we don't have enough of our culture here. Even though there is more black community than we realize, our culture is very small.
Very small.
And I would like to say that as my last question, and I'll address it as well, is that something that we can all from here on out do personally to make it better out here, to grow the culture and what everybody thinks we can do as a community to make that better. Me personally, I have a page called Cultura Events, CULTURA Events, on Instagram, and I actually promote all types of cultural events. I know a lot of people starting their own brands, a lot of local businesses, and I promote everything on there, and I actually run my own events. And actually, the 26th of this month, we'll be doing a Black History event at UMOCA, which is a museum down in Salt Lake City. So I'd hope that everybody can show up and show out to support. There will be Black artists, Black entrepreneurs, all types of Black-oriented things, and I think it's super important to show up and show out for everything that's culturally improving the state.
That is great. Let me wind up where we started, okay? In August of 1963, Dr. King, in his address, had an urgency. There was an urgency that he expressed, that it had to happen, that now was the time for it to happen. But something that he said really caught me and touched me. He said, "This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism." The tranquilizing drug of gradualism. And the irony of that comment in 1963, 58 years ago, 58 and a half years ago now, we are still facing, as you've very eloquently illustrated in this discussion, we're still facing some of the same things that we faced back then. Are we guilty of taking the tranquilizing drug of gradualism? Absolutely. Or are we in a position where, regardless of our best efforts, it is a tremendously long burn to change hearts and change minds? It's kind of like pushing a rope, you know? You can only be... So which is it? Which is it? Are we guilty of taking the tranquilizing drug of gradualism, or are we in a position where, for all of our best efforts, it's going to be a while longer?
I think the focus should be the system instead of the individuals. Individuals have to take care of themselves. I don't think we'll ever just be in a world where there's no racism in each individual. But since we have laws and systems, I think that should be the focus, and that should be where the equality should be. We can't, Black Lives Matter is a movement to change that, because why are black men being killed for the same thing that a white man's doing and then police officers are getting paid vacations? The law should be the law, whatever your color is. It should be equal opportunities for people to buy homes, jobs. That should be the focus. The individual, you have to take care of that on your own. But the focus, I don't know if, like I said, I don't know if there will ever be a world where there's no racism or that's not a thing. But the system and how it's set up and how it's taken care of should be definitely the focus. And I don't think we shouldn't drag our feet on that.
I think we've been pretty gradual. I would say because of how big Black Lives Matter got and because of how big all the riots got, shows that it's been pretty gradual. Like, it shows that not many black people had fought before that, until it took something very drastic to get everybody kind of back on the wagon before.
I wouldn't say they haven't fought until then.
I wouldn't say that, I just wouldn't say the fight hasn't been as big as it had. Like since 1963, like, there's been things, but the past couple of years have been, at least in my lifetime, the biggest things that have happened for the push for blacks. Like, and I'm pretty young, but still, like, in my lifetime, these are the main things that, like, when I look back on when I'm a little bit older, those will be the staples of the movement. And so I feel like there's been movements here and there, but there hasn't been progressive, huge movements that have kept fire and kept going.
Yeah, you're right. Because, I mean, you got 1992 or 93, Rodney King, that created another notion of, so I kind of lived through that. But then before that, it was like the Detroit and Watts riots and stuff. But I do hear where you're coming from.
I just want to see something take off and take off for a very long time.
Not just because it's popular.
Not just because it's popular. I want it to have longevity, and I feel like there hasn't been something with longevity, which is why it's been so slow.
I'm with you on that, and I'm also with Ramon. It's you're never gonna stop racism, right? It's gonna gradually get better, with time. But systems have to have a different foundation, and the foundations that we have in place in America are not built for black people to succeed, or any person to succeed, because it wasn't built by us. It wasn't built. I mean, it was literally built by us, but not. You get what I'm saying? For us. So therefore, therefore, it takes brick by brick to build the house. But if the foundation is garbage, then it doesn't even matter. Because now you gotta start with building a new foundation. And until that happens, it'll still be gradual. But until that happens, that's when you'll see exponentially way better improvement, right? And that's all the systems, that whether it's business or social economic issues or the judicial system, right? Even you mentioned it, DACA, right? We have so many things to fix. 50 years is not a long time. 58 years. That's why it's been gradually. Let's talk about 200-300 years from now. That's a different story. I don't think we've had a long, because I think in the 50s, in the 1930s and the 40s, right? If you were my white counterpart, right? We went to college together. We both went same degree. Let's say you and I went to college. You're my white counterpart. You got a degree in psychology. I got a degree in psychology, right? But you continue to have so much more success, right? I'm still here. Why am I still here? And why are you up here? Well, one, I have 10 other people that are like, hey, you made it. Help us out, right? Your family didn't need you to help them out because they were already doing well, right? So you don't have to send money back to Cali or Detroit or wherever, right? I'm still here, and everybody in my family expects me to be the head because I made it. So I can never get ahead. Even if I get a $10,000 a year promotion, it's going to me taking care of the whole family, where you can sustain wealth. Now you can buy a house and do this, and so that's, until we can close that gap, there's just certain things we're not even ready for, because we're still working and chipping, and that's going to take a long time into
we chop out the foundation, like Ramon was saying, right? And then we need a makeover.
And I think in some areas we are starting to see that, or at least question it. I was listening to a podcast earlier, and they were talking about how if we walk into a big CEO of a company and you have all these white men on the board, no one is, or in the past, no one has questioned it. But now we are questioning, well, why is there only white older men on the board? Or why are only white older men making the decisions in politics? We want to see more representation, and we're pushing for that.
Yes.
Let's go around the horn. Everybody get a last word in, okay? Figure out what your last word is. Okay, and we'll start with Jacob.
Just to kind of begin it. So I love this discussion. I've done a couple of these discussions before. I've done it down at school, and I've done one up here. But I just think there just needs to be more of this. And I know that's kind of what everybody's thinking, but I just think like for at least people my age, there needs to be more talk with the older generation. I feel like I don't talk with the older generation enough, and I feel like I don't truly understand like what you guys went through with racism and what I'm going through. Like I feel like there's still a disconnect between my generation and the older generation, and like how racism is and how it's evolved. Because it has evolved. Like racism has evolved, at least in my opinion. And like I feel like until we bridge those two gaps and talk about it, it's just me and my buddies being mad all the time. Like there's no wisdom coming down from the upper generation, I feel like. And like, no, like we handled this back into this is how we did it, this is how we got through. Like I don't feel like there's any of that, so I'd love for there to be more of that.
Need more haircuts. You just need to come here more. Brandon.
I mean, we've talked a little bit about how we can be accountable and how we can improve our own situations. Pam and Kello illustrated that quite a bit. At the same time, as Black people, we are part of a marginalized group, right? We're 2% of the population here, and historically we've been oppressed. And so I feel like the biggest sort of factors for any sort of racial improvement actually comes from people like you, Bob. And so I do think that Utah as a community needs to do a little bit better job of having some accountability to the way that the members of this community are being treated. And I think that would probably make the biggest difference in improving the lives of Black people.
Thank you. I'm going to go around the horn and we'll finish with you, Pam. Kaylin.
Like we mentioned throughout this segment, representation is a big thing for me. I've just growing up, I've always, when Black History Month occurred, all we learned about is slavery, Martin Luther King Jr., the bus situation. That's all we were known for, is just that, nothing else. There's so many Black intellects who invented things. We don't learn about the inventions. It just feels like that's all Black people are known for, is that. And I know there's so much more that we are known for. It's just
so maybe change the
education.
Yeah. The school systems. And then also my teacher had us picking cotton in the middle of class.
What?
Nope.
Yes, that's just feel like, and it was just whole discussion.
Everybody picking cotton or just the Black kids?
It's just that. That's just what they see us as. It's just that.
Did they have everybody picking cotton?
Everyone. But
Why?
And then she was like, KK would know how to do it better.
What?
Yeah.
we're gonna have that
discussion. We need a part two. So.
Oh man, we're gonna have to continue this one.
You waited till the end to say that one.
I know.
Okay, Ava Rose.
So, I really agree with, I think your name is Jacob, right? I really agree with Jacob on just learning from older generations and even sometimes younger generations so that we can all understand each other better, because we can't really tell others to understand us if we can't understand each other. So I really think that it's great to hear from different perspectives, and I feel like we should do more of this, especially in our education and even in the workforce. For people who are at work, we should acknowledge kind of understanding people who feel like an outcast or feel marginalized. So I think talking is a good solution and understanding each other. So yeah.
Cal?
I think this is a great start, like he was saying, that we just need to have more reputation as far as who we are, where we're coming from. I didn't realize you stayed in Orem. Orem is completely different than here in Ogden and so forth. And to have all these different opinions shows you why it's so hard to get someone on the other side to change it for us. Because there's so many different opinions, you know. He has this opinion, he has this, she has it, he has, like, the government could never come down and change everything to accommodate everybody. You might make one person happy and the other person's gonna be, you know, upset about it. So that's what I was talking about, where it's self-accountability. So I know that there's racism because I deal with it all the time. I face it every day doing work. But there's a thing that we have to do is change that. And we have to change it. It's not going to change unless we change it. We can't expect someone on the other side to change something for us. Like this meeting and you bringing this together. This is a start. When we have more of these and you get more people in here that have history and done more, you start seeing who you can talk to. Like, you live in Orem, come down. You know, I mean, Kellogg Motor, I'm here. Ramon's here. This band is here. I mean, we're all here. You know what I mean? Because you can't come and just get everybody together. It's going to take so many, and then for, you know, over time, it'll build. But we can build it and we can do it. We just have to do it. So that's what I get from this. I get from this that it's all of us, everybody has their pain. I understand, like with black women here, it takes a lot because it's hard for you. I know it's hard for me, but to think about what the ladies have to go through, I can't even fathom that. But as a black man, I can make it easier by weathering the storm a little bit more so. At the moment when I was absent, I can be present now because after hearing it, I realize I've been absent. I'm a part of the problem that some of the ladies are having because I haven't been present for my black, you know? But this is something that helps every one of us be more educated about what we need to do. So from this meeting, I'm going to be more present. I'm going to get with Ramon more so. I'm going to get with this man. I'm going to get with all these guys and try to figure out what we can do for us getting together and what we can do for us setting something. And then the next time if we ever get together, we can say, this is what we're doing about it. This is not what we're waiting for someone to do.
Yeah.
So we'll take that first step, and he'll take a second one, he'll take a third, and a fourth, and a fifth, and a sixth, and a seventh. Before you know, we'll be singing Kumbaya. but it's not gonna, but the thing about it, it's not gonna fix anything, but it's gonna make you feel more comfortable to sit across the table with someone and talk about something. And even if you have different views, that doesn't mean that you're wrong. It just means that you have a different view. If I lived in Orem, I couldn't fathom. I stay in South Jordan. South Jordan's tough for me. You know, I lived in South Jordan. I've been pulled over so many times in South Jordan. But what it has done for me is it's made me get my paperwork straight. It made me make sure my license is straight, my business. So now I'm legit, but prior to that, I wasn't legit. You understand? So being a black man in Utah forces you, if you're gonna run a business, is to do your paperwork, do everything the right way. And that right way brings forth a great man or a great woman setting forth. So when something does happen to you, you have the right to say it's because of my race. But if you're not right, you don't have the right to say it. So that's what I get from it.
Beautiful.
For me, I feel that inclusion, collaboration, education, and mental health are the four components that would not necessarily liberate us, but would help us build that foundation. Whether it's an Asian brick, black brick, white brick, Hispanic brick, all together to build that foundation to change the fabrics of the things that we have to go through as a society, as black men and women. It's due for a change. I was telling Tiffany, I can't speak for black women, but I know that there's a component there where a lot of our black women feel lost, alone, dealing with different kinds of traumas, and I feel as black men, we have dropped the ball on that. And I think that part of that is because of mental health, and because, you know, if you're not feeling strong enough to carry your own, well, how are you going to carry someone else's, right? So I think we have to do a better job at not only
as the leaders, and not saying that black women are just the leaders, our black women are leaders as well, but we have to lead, and I feel like we've done a poor job at leading, because it does start at home. Everything starts at home, and I feel like as a society sometimes we neglect our home to go to someone else's home and do better. Then we come back to our home and it's a mess. So I feel like we need to clean our own house before we clean someone else's.
Tiffany.
I like everything that's been said so far, and I completely agree. I just think that we also need to focus on not just during like Black History Month, right?
Yes.
Not just, we need to celebrate culture and people's individuality all the time, and I think that's what we should really take away from this, is just to create something inclusive is by inviting others. It's not about being colorblind. We don't want anyone to be colorblind. We want you to see our color and accept our color and our culture and celebrate it, and that's where I think the direction is that we need to go.
Beautiful.
Ramon.
Did Pam, did you get to do your final word? And then we'll get to Ramon. You better practice back there, Buster.
That's the whole thing out.
That's what I'm gonna say.
I would like to say that basically this is a beautiful thing that was done, and I think, like everyone has said, there are things like this that need to be done more. We need to come together, collaborate, and support each other in any way that I can. I have nothing to do with trucks, but I'm sure that there's something that we can come together to make something great. And I think it's really just about showing up and, like I said before, not complaining about the things that we're lacking, but making movements with other people who have similar ideologies to make a movement to make things better for all of us.
Okay. Ramon, you're the last one. The words of the wise.
I actually agree with everybody, but the only thing I would say is, like Tiffany said, I get bothered when the only time we want to have these kind of discussions or bring up awareness is Black History Month, which I don't really care for, or Martin Luther King Day or whatever they call that now. But other than that, no, I agree with everybody. I think it was a very nice and beautiful conversations coming from so many different perspectives, and we should do it more often to have progression. And we appreciate you for getting that together and doing that and allowing us to have this voice. And yeah, so that's where I'm at.
Well,
thank you for this platform.
Thank you so much for trusting me